...2022 has been a torrid year of sorts, but we have been treated to many visual, technical and artistic delights. No matter your platform, there's something here for everyone. As Christmas is now fully wrapped up and we've entered 2023, apologies for my tardiness, I wanted to cover my top 5 standouts of 2022, a few that missed out on the top slot, and a little bit of nostalgic treats in there for years gone by. But don't worry, with the chapter selection you can skip all that if you're not interested. So let's not waste any time, let's kick off with my number 5. Telephony Digital were created to make racing games, and bar some small excursions into outer space, they have not only created the most enduring legacy in the genre of any single studio, they have defined and built up the modern RPG racer we know today. The heritage speaks for itself, and I covered this earlier in the year on a Retro Bytes episode. But with GT7 being such a labour of love, the bittersweet taste of online limited titles certainly reared its head during and after launch, but with that has come some of the largest and most feature-rich updates to motivate you to keep it pinned all year long. From a visual quality level, they have always been state-of-the-art and leaders, and with GT7 they managed to continue that here, with almost industry-standard HDR, which I still say is the single best game you can use to test a TV's HDR quality. It could have been made for a Sony TV showcase. Beyond this, the PS5 version offered ray trace reflections, global illumination, along with better shadows and ambient occlusion. For a game that defined the real-time replays back on the PlayStation 1, these really can add a great deal to the game, as we all like to look back at a tasty manoeuvre or race-winning moment. The time, love and every meticulous month per car is evident, from every carbon fibre weave to the bucket seats of a retro classic. The game is a love note to the undying petrol-headed passion within the team, and it bleeds through us into the players, especially those that are equally petrol-headed. The depth and technical updates for this title were extensive, with a full time cycle during races, dynamic weather which affects both the track conditions and your car's handling, cloud simulation, but the replays are still where the game's astounding attention to detail shine the brightest. From car models that look like they came right out of the CAD department of Ferrari, McLaren et al, the poly count is phenomenal, and even though the PlayStation 5 offers some extensive updates over the base PS4 and Pro versions, they still have the core assets, detail and quality to impress. The biggest reason it only made my top 5 is that the actual gameplay's visuals, although great, are still significantly reduced over those replays. Ray tracing is an obvious sacrifice, and not really that big of a problem during races. It really comes down with the reuse of many track areas and assets from GT Sport, and the PBR-based material composites are not consistent from cars to tracks. Some are brilliant, such as a local haunt for me in Brands Hatch, while night races in Tokyo can look much closer to PS3 buildings at times. The lack of much post-processing during races adds to this, with a clean but sterile look compared to the flamboyant replays. But again, the balance of graphics and clarity of gameplay is always a delicate one. Also, some frame rate performance issues can happen in both the 60 and 30 FPS modes in gameplay and replays, but this is still a leader in the racing genre, and one that is one of my go-to games for showing off HDR against all those slick metallic paints and some sick racing moves. The GT itch can never be satiated.
While safety is one of many Enrichment Center goals.
Modding games has been around since the 8-bit era. From the early days of peeking and poking, we have been changing, cheating and even improving the titles we loved. Portal was a huge hit for Valve and one of my favourite puzzle games ever, alongside that other small title they made with the same engine. Here though, Nvidia's team of programmers have merged the potential of real-time ray tracing into a more affordable path trace solution on this DX9 based fixed function title, which then relies on the DXVK Vulkan wrapper to convert the DirectX calls at runtime, the same as the Steam Deck relies on for many of its releases. All this abstraction with a mini VM state or the RTX bridge is key for the RT Remix application, which sadly comes locked within the Nvidia Omniverse. The features this modded delight offer are very impressive. but the fixed state pipeline of DX9 titles are a requirement, as this is a classic man-in-the-middle injection process. Built on Pixar's open source USD, Universal Scene Description, this is an exhaustive method to create and manage 3D locales and objects. The USD injector can receive draw calls, collate, curate, and then replace them on demand, which can transform a 15-year-old title into the current generation. Although the path trace light and reflections are a key ingredient in this delicious graphic soup, many of the visual increases come from AI increased textures, which are now PBR based, normal maps, noise maps, and improved light calculation that take the world of metal sheets and wormholes and rejuvenate it. These are often missed in many of these updated titles, and much is discussed around the ray tracing doing all the heavy lifting, but without the improved assets and those PBR based materials and the art itself, this would not be such a standout. The reason it made it into my list is not simply because of the quality on offer here from such an old title, but the fact the method at which this can be achieved without access to the source code, no pun intended, but I'll still take it, and the results are quite the beacon for how far modding a title has come and how much you can transform it. This madness goes one step beyond, and maybe even two, what we saw from Xbox and its backwards compatibility updates. The highlight though is how much the world now raises the pixel accuracy to be much closer to how light reacts in reality. To be truthful, this is still a rough approximation, like almost all game rendering techniques, but here the approximation is the closest we have seen yet. From self-shadowing, objects, perspective and surface correct reflections, refractions, light beams through portals and bounces around a scene with scintillating accuracy. Shadows are cast from direct and indirect lights, scenes move from a game world to be more like an offline renderer. It truly is a sight to behold as you play it, and if you are a long-time fan of Portal and the entire Orange Box collection, it really excites you to think of games how far they've come and how much something like RTX Half-Life Update, maybe even others, can improve the original titles further. Being able to make a game now in the source engine and then update it through RTX Remix could be an entire new avenue of titles to come that could really get some legs out of the RTX cards. The poor performance on AMD cards and its heavy reliance on DLSS 3 and 2 to run anywhere close to 60 FPS, which is still not possible here on my RTX 2070 with an overclock or using ultra performance, it really needs high-end GPUs, and that still doesn't mean you'll get 60 FPS locked. And this is one area that still leaves it a slightly lower level on my list, but all that said, the right engine in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world. A very bright entry as my number 4.
Ugh. Rotten flesh.
Yes, it's the butcher's district. It's the shortest way to the herbalist.
Asobo have been steadily growing since the start of the PS360 generation, and in that time they have been forward-looking on a visual and technical front. It should come as no surprise that they again managed to make my top list of graphics for a third year. With A Plague's Tale Requiem, they have excelled themselves in many key areas, and on a pure gameplay and story perspective, much like many on my list, this also holds true. Much of the quality here is due to the tools, development pipeline and skills they have built within their own in-house technology. With Innocent selling well, they have been able to continue this level-headed story that tries to remain as grounded to reality and history as possible. No more is this evident in the medieval European-centric world they have lovingly recreated here. As they are based in a 1,000-year-plus old city of Bordeaux in France, they have the inspiration of the history and culture all around them. This is evident in every polygon, pixel and skinned mesh, and it all feels sufficiently close to the long-lasting European legacy it represents. The visual quality in almost all areas has taken a huge leap up from Innocence. Textures, models, materials and animation is significantly better, with the studio investing in their own motion capture studio, which is evident in the quality of character models both in gameplay and the real-time cinematics. In addition, with the game being current generation only, they have not skimped on polygon count and highly detailed, emotive and constructed characters within this rat-filled tale. The quality extends with exquisite lighting and shading, complete with subsurface scattering, improved skinning and bone meshes over the previous title, which increases the in-game and cutscenes significantly over the previous game. The technical leaps extend to gameplay with improved rack count, lighting, combat volumetrics and foliage, which actually stand out as possibly the very best I have seen in any title, both in the draw distance, the animation and fidelity, with only the Series S standing out as the weakest rung in the ladder. Complementing this is the accomplished post-effects suite that includes all the tricks of the trade in bokeh depth of field, high quality per pixel motion blur, bloom, fog volumes, and some incredibly artistic yet accurate PBR based materials and lighting that impress in the 30 FPS mode. But the team took the Sony approach and leveraged the 120 FPS screens we may have, much of the footage you have seen here from the 120 FPS mode that takes advantage of that 40 FPS middle ground option, and since launch the team have improved the performance and stability further on all platforms, with even the Series S offering a decent yet reduced 40 FPS mode, which maxes out at 1080p, and with the Series X and PlayStation 5 both hitting 1440p, reconstructed back to 1080p or 4K respectively across the consoles using a TAAU-like solution. The benefit this adds can be noticed even without a frame time graph, but if you have a 120Hz screen, I recommend that you use that on your console's menu, as once engaged the game will simply run at that 25 millisecond frame time throughout your medieval rat race, although still expect some GPU and CPU related dips throughout your pilgrimage. From a story, visual, music, gameplay and its first party like quality, this game and studio have stood out for me again in 2022. And if it were not for a new pretender to the crown in my number 2, they could have challenged for the top spot. As it stands, bronze is no less worthy for this Gaelic giant.
Listen, it's our fault if he was late.
You have no right to be here! Remy, you handle it, and don't disappoint me.
But the boy,
He's the right age to learn.
you shouldn't have come.
You don't want to do this, believe me.
You talk too much.
Elias, are you sure this is the right one?
For a brand new studio built from ground zero in 2019 to shipping their very first title a mere 3 years later, it's phenomenal. But the sheer quality and visual needle they have pushed is the most impressive. Taking Unreal Engine 4.27 and bending it to their horrific demands has delivered a truly standout and future-looking title. From a headline-grabbing aspect, it has all the tentpole items covered: ray tracing on PS5, Series X and high-end PC, 60 FPS performance mode, fog volumes, tessellation and some of the best digital actors and post-processing this generation has seen thus far, bar none. And it even manages to deliver the same core impact on last generation consoles. Yes, even the old front-loading Betamax Xbox One gets to die out in style. From a pure graphics and art perspective, this is a well-balanced, carefully tuned and stylishly executed game. Lighting is often of film quality, be it nature's lights during a snowstorm to electrical lights that guide you through or even into danger. From the diegetic UI, health system and even the simply top-tier sound design. The intelligence and style within the gameplay design, from structured yet clear physical guides to the fluid and satisfying evade, melee and weapon-based combat. Yes, it can certainly have some issues with multiple enemies at times and other niggles and bugs throughout, but on the whole, it delivers impactful action, tense atmosphere and gore galore. The skill and patience required within some of the encounters seems to be missed by almost all reviews I've seen. Storming in will get you killed, but using stealth, all of your skills and weapons fluidly all gels, and it is very satisfying to perfect and clear a room without a scratch. Well, almost. which highlights another prodigious aspect of the title, the animation and dismemberment system, which was another area the team customised within UE Engine 4 specifically for this game. It not only works on your enemies in combat by removing limbs, targeting tentacles, and even decapitating enemies being little more than a flesh wound, your own avatar can also play into these glorious deaths. Nodding to the splatter horror roots of the late 70s and early 80s this title aims for. Customised ray trace reflections and shadows elevate the now gen and PC version specifically in some key areas of both gameplay and the stunning real-time cutscenes, and they even found time to get in those Series X ray trace reflections as I mentioned in my review, all down lightly to the DirectX and PlayStation 4 API split. These all stand out due to the photorealistic rendering from the main characters within the game, the simply sky-high IQ that offers a stable and clean film-like image complete with expensive effects such as sprite-based bokeh depth of field, transparent reflections, and even subsurface scattering and transmission through ear, skin, and all those fleshy parts. From a technical art, sound, design and gameplay perspective, every aspect of the title all coagulates not only into an exceptional title even for first-party Sony studios, but one that now stands in the same quality of much bigger and more established teams. I enjoyed every blood-soaked moment of my trip to the dark side, issues and bugs aside, and I'm already anticipating the DLC later this year and maybe even a bigger, better and more explosive sequel. Striking Distance Studios hit hard as my number 2.
Take my hand! Gotcha!
Now, we have been playing games for a long time, and I wanted to just add in some retrospective memories of games I was playing 40 years ago. Now, video games were still in their infancy, but I was out of mine, and back then, if you wanted the best, then you had to play the arcades. One game that really stood out to me in 1982 was the Sega classic Zaxxon. Ushering the isometric shooter, it had both a unique hook and a perspective-based challenge for you to overcome. Having to use a shadow of your ship was key to surviving a run. The trickery with 2D sprites to create a faux 3D world was convincing and eye-catching. Taking the long-established shooter genre from games such as Space Invaders and Scramble the year earlier, amongst others, Zaxxon was one of the first titles that raised the game mostly because of its visual presentation that made the concept feel new. I love this game, but it would be a few years later before I played it at home on my Commodore 64. Staying with the arcades, and the single biggest and most visually impressive game of '82 is one that has stayed with me since that very day. Namco's seminal Pole Position. It not only defined the modern racing game, being the first that was based on a real track in Japan's Fuji Racecourse. Again, the 3D perspective was the game changer here, and the sit-in or stand-up cabinets came with a full wheel and pedals. The experience as a young boy with a love for all things 2 and 4-wheeled was mind-blowing. The home ports did a decent job, all things considered, but even back then, I knew that the arcade was the true place to experience this stunner of a title. And moving into the home systems, I was still playing my Atari VCS at the time, but I had managed to be given a VIC-20 in the same year. Due to the popularity of One Angry Ape and An Heroic Carpenter in 1981, this was the year that I spent hours of my time trying to perfect the awesome platforming skills of barrel jumping and damsel rescuing. The arcade was a visual feast. Even in 1983, it was a stunner, but the home Atari VCS port had to make some significant cutbacks to fit into a machine that was only designed to run Pong and Combat. The port is exceptional compared to the thousands of pounds the arcade cost and the toaster specs of the VCS. Still, it enabled me to play for longer and for far less cost than sinking 10p's into the coin-op. The spirit was intact, and although the visuals in side-by-sides really highlight the pixel clarity and colour that the VCS loses, your mind more than made up for that gulf, and it felt so good to be Donkey Konging at home. Even the VIC-20 got an unofficial port of the game, but I'll save that for another time. From a home system perspective, I think Pitfall takes the crown, as not only did it change the concept up from arcade short play, replete play model by adding adventure and exploration into the flip screen platforming action, but it also pushed the VCS very hard with excellent graphics, a variety of enemies and screens, and even some decent music and sound to get lost in the jungle as we all pretended to be Indiana Jones. Ultimately, for the arcades, it's pole position here that takes the top spot, and for the VCS, the Pitfall is the very best you could get back then, and the sales cemented that. But were you there back then? Was there a standout title for you that's not on this list in 1982? Leave your comment down below and let me know if you also swung into the pit or snatched the pole back in the day.
Get to the weapon! If I can draw that thing close, open fire!
Now, my number one is likely not a shock to any that have played it. The success of Zero Dawn meant a sequel was assured, and in the rule of Hollywood sequels, you go bigger, badder and more bombastic, something Guerrilla delivered in dinosaur-like spades. The most blatant upgrades you see within a few moments are the massive increase to foliage and world density in Forbidden West. Even the base PlayStation 4 has such a vast amount of fauna within each frame that on its own it feels like a huge leap. But bringing in the PlayStation 5, you really get to appreciate the extra horsepower and fill rate that console brings. Be it long distance views of trees, bushes and shrubs from on high to denser clamps of grass or moss layers, improving a variety of sections within the title. This demonstrates the clear divide the PlayStation 5 GPU offers for the developers, and specifically one so well versed as Guerrilla. Beyond this, the team have made huge strides improving on their already stunning Decima engine. World interaction and dynamism was a key focus for them, and they made significant leaps here, many of which are also in the PlayStation 4 version. From the real-time lighting and dynamic time of day all helps the quality here, merged with the pro-based sample solution to create stunning looking worlds both inside and out, complete with global illumination light bounce, SSR reflections that are blended with some of the best materials this generation has seen. Both character models and animation have seen the same if not more increases. With such a vast variety within the game and mixed with motion capture, performance capture and procedural animation, the relentless quality is only exceeded by its scale. It must be praised the amount of effort from the teams involved with the investment from Sony to keep pushing such huge and expensive titles like this. Long may these rivers flow, which is another big increase in the technology. With Aloy now being able to explore both the skies and the seas, it cannot be under-egged how much the split rendering techniques and design work here present very distinct worlds within the same game. The quality is so good, it's enough to make you thirsty. Now beyond this, the team saw fit to offer a multitude of modes that can start from 4K and then reduce the resolution whilst boosting performance. VRR gets its own unlocked 60 or 120 FPS modes, giving each player the choice to enjoy it as they see fit. Controller integration is one of the best since Astrobot. The haptics give you feedback on the world, riding robots, and the force feedback triggers enhance the complex and vibrant combat throughout. For such a huge open world, expansive RPG-like story and a variety of enemies, areas and stories to tell, the only downside is the game has to end at some point. Oh yeah, and I wish there was an off switch for Aloy's voice at times, specifically in the puzzles. Now, Guerrilla have yet again topped my list, and they deserve all the praise and adulation they have received. Forbidden West is both a stunning PlayStation 5 debut, but also the perfect swan song for the PlayStation 4 generation. A monster of a number one, and my very best graphics and technology title for 2022. And for all those that never made my list, Ragnarok was a huge title and one that I loved, and also found some areas of disappointment in, largely related to some story and gameplay choices the team made, but from a technical level they made big increases in their engine, least of which was the upgrade to a temporal reconstruction AA and DRS, dropping the checkerboard from the first game, improvement to models and lighting, including some ray trace enhanced SSR reflections, and much better subsurface scattering and ambient occlusion. The PlayStation 5 got dual modes, but again this was a standout for PS4 players, with both the visual quality of 1080p and a pretty much locked 30 FPS being a standout. It simply was not a big enough leap overall to make my top 5.
About time.
Independent developers continued to raise the game and impress, and with Stray being a standout for me, not only in the use of Unreal Engine 4 and the stunning colour tones, art design and surreal subterranean world you find yourself in, but also for telling such a strong and engaging story within no voice work and very minimal text. It felt like Journey or Abzu in that sense, with an incredibly powerful art direction that helped draw you in to this feline adventure.
Well, Bushnell did design and program both his games.
And finally, one of the single best games I've played this year is really the very best retro collection ever made in Digital Eclipse's Atari 50 collection, charting through an almost museum-like presentation from the birth of the Atari Beast through the arcades, the home VCS, the computers, and back into the console space in the Lynx and Jaguar. It is rammed with so much content, quality and emulation that even those not connected to that time can get a great deal from it. The amount and quality of emulation, updated games, filters and more really stands out as a passion project, and one that I wanted to praise in some form or other, but as time is always short, I can only fit that in here. If you are interested, then pick this up on everything from Switch, PC to PS5. You will certainly not be sorry. In a final note, I want to mention the fact that I'm very disappointed in Xbox overall. Microsoft have let themselves and all of the players down. Last year, they just about managed to get in, thanks to the delights from Forza Horizon, but now they don't even make any slot here from anything from first-party studios. I'm not calling this out to create console wars, I'm calling it out because this is not what you do to raise the game. And it's a shame that Microsoft have had such a poor year, all the reasons understood, but Sony had the same challenges and so did many other teams, and they still got games out the door. I hope that this is the last time I will not be covering a single Microsoft platform title on my list, because that would be a very sad day indeed. And that's it, my last video to wrap up what we saw and played and enjoyed in 2022. Is this list to your liking? Is it not? What did you pick? What did you think was the ones that should have topped the list? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, I'm completely self-funded and independent, so you can help this by commenting down below, liking the video, sharing it, and also subscribing to the channel. All that good stuff that I know is very boring, but every now and then I like to throw it in. Anyway, I'm off to walk off into the sunset, but I'll catch you very soon on the next one.